Over 10 million readers, hundreds of thousands of heated threads. This novel set the internet on fire. He's a man, he's pregnant, and the father is his longtime rival. Now, their secret's out. A kiss caught on camera, and suddenly, everyone knows. My Archrival Got Me Pregnant Episode 8. Something strange had happened recently in the OB/GYN department at Jiwa Hospital. So strange that people were convinced something was up. Dr. Lucas Shaw had stopped stealing pens. Yusang observed him secretly for a few days before discovering that Lucas had somehow acquired 3 full boxes of gel pens, red, blue, and black, making him overnight the wealthiest pen owner in the entire department. But Lucas was absurdly possessive. He locked the boxes with a tiny key and wouldn't even lend one to Director Monroe. He hoarded them like they were gold bars occasionally, pulling them out to flaunt his wealth like a miser from a Dickens novel. One day, after yet another round of casual pen flexing, Yusang finally lost it. He leaned over and grumbled in Julian Grant's ear. "I've never even heard of that brand. Probably writes like crap. What's he so smug about?" Julian, who had been using the same pens for years, paused. "You sure? You haven't heard of them?" Yusang blinked at Julian's lack of outrage and thought back carefully. "I mean, they do look kind of familiar." Julian nodded slightly, satisfied. Then Yusang huffed. "Whatever. I bet they leak. Probably ruin his white coat any day now." Julian went quiet for a second, then said, with a strange expression, "Probably not." "How not?" "Totally will." Yusang grumbled. "You know, he's acting like those pens are from his boyfriend or something." Julian replied flatly. "They are, huh? He has a boyfriend? Since when?" Yusang didn't pick up on the tone. "How do you know? Have you met him? Is he hot?" Julian hesitated. Complimenting himself in front of Yusang felt weird. After a moment's thought, he said carefully, "He might look kinda like me." "Kinda like you?" Yusang exclaimed. "Then he must be stunning." "Damn." Lucas really lucked out. And then, in a deeply sincere tone, he added, "Julian, you've got to find someone. You can't let Lucas beat you at this too. He got over Zhonglan. Why haven't you?" Julian. He was suddenly convinced Yusang and his mom would get along great. Yusang went on. "But first, maybe lose the beer belly? You're definitely gaining. Even good-looking guys struggle to date when they're getting chubby." He studied Julian's face. "But still, you're lucky. Gaining weight and not even puffing up your face. Hide it under your coat and no one can tell." Julian thought. "I underestimated him. Yusang's worse than my mother." Desperate to change the subject before Yusang launched into a lecture on blood pressure, Julian blurted, "I have a boyfriend." "What the hell? Really?" Yusang yelped. "Why didn't you say anything? That's huge. How could you keep it a secret?" Julian took a sip of water to hide the tiny smile tugging at his lips. "We just started dating." Yusang, now fully invested, leaned in. "So who's hotter, your guy or Lucas's?" Julian glanced across the office at the farthest desk. No one was there, but a deep blue jacket lay draped over the chair. He had bought it for Lucas the day after they made things official. The pens were a day one gift. Lucas had bright features, and the cool blue toned down his sharpness. Just enough, made him look striking without being flashy. Julian thought for a moment, then replied, "My boyfriend is very good looking." Said very good-looking boyfriend was currently chatting with Zhang Cheng in the OR. The patient had just gone under, and while checking the vitals, Zhang Cheng said, "Hey, have you heard the wild rumor going around? About you?" "What rumor?" Lucas asked, unconcerned. "I don't mess around." Zhang Cheng hesitated. "I heard you and Julian are dating?" Lucas, the man who'd been cool as a cucumber, suddenly coughed into his glove. "Who told you that?" "Some college classmate." After surviving the armed robbery, Zhang Cheng had been telling everyone he could about, while crying to an old college friend. The guy consoled him, and then spilled the latest gossip. The classmate hadn't even been at the reunion. He'd heard from someone else who claimed Julian had dragged Lucas away by the wrist. Then someone else said they were holding hands. And from there, the story evolved. Childhood friends, secretly in love for years, forced into academic rivalry to protect their public images. Then Huang Bin had posted in the group chat, apologizing for spreading rumors about Julian, and admitted he and his girlfriend broke up due to his own issues. He even thanked Lucas for helping him become a better man. That set off another wave of gossip. Julian wasn't actually gaining weight. He was pregnant with Lucas's baby, and Lucas went after Huang Bin in a jealous rage. Zhang Cheng, relaying all this, looked stunned. So, who's supposedly pregnant? Lucas stared. Do I get to pick someone to assassinate if I guess right? I think they said it was that guy who was always third in our class. Zhang Cheng said. Anyway, what's the truth? Everyone keeps asking if I've got inside info. I'm just trying to keep up. Lucas sighed, skipping the Huang Bin part. Julian was mad about something. Dragged me away. That's all. Not that deep. Zhang Cheng stared. He dragged you, and you just went with him? You've got no fight left in you? Lucas, unfazed, continued checking vitals. Judge me all you want. Whatever. I've got a boyfriend. The man was so deeply in love he didn't care about winning anymore. His mind kept drifting back to Julian, who had buttoned his coat for him that morning, fingers gentle and warm. Or that glance Julian gave him during rounds. He had been scolding a student for misbuttoning a coat. What's with these buttons? He'd snapped. But the moment Lucas walked in, Julian glanced over and said calmly, Unique. The poor student blinked in confusion. Lucas leaned in and whispered, Maybe he just likes me too much. He used to misbutton out of laziness. Now, it was strategic, bait for a certain neat freak. Not that it always worked. One evening, Julian was brushing his teeth when Lucas wandered around, with his shirt half open, after days of buttoning them for him like he was a toddler. Julian snapped. If you don't learn to button those stupid shirts, I'm cutting them all off and replacing them with zippers. Lucas hugged him from behind. Then you can help me zip them up. Julian, unimpressed, spat out toothpaste and said coldly, Sleep on the couch tonight? Ever since returning from the hotel, Lucas had claimed the bed. Sure, sleep quality hadn't improved much, but he wasn't giving it up. That night, he'd buttoned his pajamas carefully and pushed open Julian's door with the air of a man passing security clearance. Julian glanced him up and down, nodded, and let him in. Lucas wasted no time crawling in and wrapping him in his arms. Julian leaned on him, half laying. Lucas rubbed his back and shoulders, the occasional words slipping between them. What were you and Zhang Cheng talking about earlier? Julian asked. He'd noticed Zhang Cheng whispering and glancing over. Lucas smirked. Said you're good looking. The truth. That is the truth, Lucas said seriously. Most scientific fact I know. Truer than any journal article. Those papers aren't always truthful, he added. Didn't you see that big replication scandal? Julian rolled his eyes, speechless. Lucas's random tangents had effectively derailed the conversation and softened Julian's expression. Lucas looked at his face and suddenly said, By the way, I saw something today. Thought I should tell you. He pulled out his phone and showed Julian a picture. Two men, one with his back turned, the other partially blurred, but still unmistakable. A friend asked if I recognized anyone. Said the background looked like our hospital. Julian's brows furrowed. Lucas added, It was from the day you're blind. Date came to find you. Ah, right. That woman had said she was an artist. She must have painted this from a photo. Lucas continued, I said I didn't recognize them. Then messaged her to ask her to take it down. Mentioned it was kind of invasive. Julian nodded. He didn't love being photographed without permission, but it wasn't a huge deal. Lucas had already handled it. Then, after a pause, he realized something. Lucas was bragging, and Lucas didn't even try to deny it. Well, she was your date. I figured I should let you know. Also, why'd she blur my face? Rude. Julian blinked. You liked me back then? Lucas grinned. Would you be happier if I said yes? Julian didn't answer. Lucas leaned in and whispered, Then I've loved you since birth. That's, like what, 20-something years of unrequited love? Julian often thought Lucas had two different personalities, the nemesis version and the boyfriend version. One picked fights, the other picked his heartstrings. Hated how effective Lucas's sweet talk was. Truly hated it. Lucas saw the pink creeping up Julian's ears and added, It's okay. If you want to smile, just smile. No need to hold back. He paused. Actually, that reminds me. We should take a photo together. What kind? A wedding photo. Julian blinked. I never said I was marrying you. You said we were seriously together, Lucas replied. That's enough for me. He launched into plans. Let's go back to where we met. The hibiscus tree. So symbolic. Hibiscus doesn't bloom right now, Julian pointed out. Then we wait. Unless... That's you saying yes? Julian. Lucas changed course. That tree has our plaque now. That red background? Perfect for a marriage certificate. Or we could go to the internet cafe in B City. Play a few rounds where we first met. Julian yawned. It's closed. You know that? Lucas gasped. You do miss me. I was born before you. Oh. Lucas grinned. Then why'd you call me bro? Julian was instantly mute. Back then, he'd chosen bro as a respectful term after discarding all the awkward options like Dr. Shaw or Professor. Now, lying together as lovers, the words suddenly made Julian's ears burn. Lucas, of course, didn't let up. Call me again. Not a chance. Julian hesitated, then softened. Say something else. Without missing a beat, Lucas said, Then let me hold you. Julian hesitated. They'd hugged before, but in bed, it meant something more. Still, he didn't say no. Lucas took silence as permission and pulled him in. But the baby bump got in the way. The baby kicked him. Hard. Julian burst out laughing. Lucas felt the vibration through his chest. He looked down, forehead to forehead, and smiled. Albert's been sending me new data, he murmured. Said once the surgery's done, he'll walk me through it all. Our baby's going to be just fine. Julian, Lucas whispered, did you pour my cologne all over the bed? What? Lucas pulled him closer. I thought it was in my head. But it's so strong. Julian played dumb. It's your scent. Lucas blinked. Didn't you say you have rhinitis? You couldn't smell anything. Julian flinched. You're too close. Oh. Lucas looked concerned. If it bothers you, I can move away. He shifted until Julian grabbed his sleeve. Lucas froze. Julian's hand rested on his abs. Solid, warm, his pulse clear beneath skin and muscle. Julian pressed gently, fascinated. He traced down, across the ridge of Lucas's abs, to where Lucas's stomach met his. The bump pressed against him, real and present. Lucas gasped. I think I forgot to use conditioner, he blurted. Gonna take a shower, and fled. Julian, left behind, took over his pillow and snuggled in. He opened his eyes, sniffed carefully. Yep, Lucas definitely used conditioner. 9 a.m., changing room, Jiwa Hospital or Julian Grant emerged from the locker room dressed in dark green scrubs, just as the door beside him swung open. Come in a sec, said a man with soft, fox-like eyes, leaning against the door frame and motioning to him. Lovers in the honeymoon phase were like sugar slow-cooked to a golden amber by a master, sweet, sticky, and inseparable. But lovers in the honeymoon phase also had jobs, especially when both were about to be fathers and had formula money to earn. So, while they couldn't show too much affection in front of others, they snuck it in wherever they could. Julian checked the hallway, saw no one, then stepped in and folded his arms. What? Lucas Shaw slipped 2 pieces of chocolate into the breast pocket of Julian's scrubs, trying to bribe Dr. Grant. Can I borrow him for 30 seconds? Julian took one out, unwrapped it, and popped it into his mouth. The smooth cocoa melted on his tongue, mixing with the gaze of his lover, which was stickier than the chocolate itself, and the cramped locker room instantly sparked with heat. No one said a word, but the air was thick with sugar. Julian tucked the wrapper into his pocket and turned to unlock the door. Your 30 seconds are up. I'm leaving. But before he could step out, a kiss landed unexpectedly on the back of his neck. His hand paused on the lock. He turned slowly, one hand still in his pocket, eyes meeting Lucas's. Lucas's gaze lingered on his lips, a playful smile tugging at the corners. You want a kiss? Julian asked. So in the end, Dr. Shaw negotiated an extension and bought himself a kiss, sweet and chocolate flavored. They straightened their clothes, exited the locker room one after the other, washed their hands in silence, and finally headed into their respective operating rooms, backs facing, masks on, traces of heat hidden beneath sterile fabric. From that moment on, the next time they'd see each other would be dinner, together in the on-call lounge. Surgeons were busy. The hospital had a cafeteria, sure, but few doctors had time to use it. Takeout was the norm, cheap, quick, chaotic, but tonight was special. 2 doctors were treating everyone, one bringing milk tea, the other fried chicken. The reason? Identical. They were both in relationships. A rare coincidence, perhaps, but once everyone found out it was Julian and Lucas treating, no one was surprised at all. In fact, some joked that the 2 of them had probably synchronized their relationship start date just to keep things competitive. Julian, who had wanted to subtly hint at his relationship status tonight, was deeply annoyed. He listened to all the gossip, expecting someone, anyone, to connect the dots and realize they were the couple in question. No one did. To make matters worse, someone had kindly seated Lucas as far from Julian as possible. Meanwhile, Yu Sang and Zhang Cheng, who had finally patched things up post-robbery, were now arguing about whether milk tea or fried chicken was superior. Julian sat in the middle of a happy crowd, sipping the health porridge Lucas had specially ordered for him, and watched his friends bicker. And sure enough, before long, the conversation turned. Who had the better girlfriend? Julian or Lucas? Julian nearly choked on his porridge. He glanced over at Lucas, who was already looking at him. Without a word, they both stood up, took their food, and exited in opposite directions. They regrouped in the hospital gym, settling down in the empty boxing room for a peaceful dinner for 2. Julian hadn't expected that dating at his age would feel more covert than high school romance. They'd discussed going public. Lucas had brought it up, but Julian had decided, not yet. The department was full of gossip-hungry people. Some patients liked to pry, too. And while homosexuality wasn't taboo in medicine, not everyone was open-minded. Julian worried it might affect their work. More importantly, he wasn't ready to face their students, especially the Yusang-led younger generation. He'd tried hinting at it to Tong Kei. The man had promptly stormed over, trying to drag Julian to the psych ward. Lucas had coolly recommended the very psychiatrist who'd once straightened him out. Only after thanking him did Tang Kei realize who'd spoken. Julian, blink twice if he's holding you hostage, Tong Kei said grimly. Julian didn't blink. If it's the baby holding you hostage, blink once. Still nothing. Tong Kei suffered a mild breakdown. He wandered the apartment for half an hour before lighting a cigarette on the balcony, only to be scolded by Lucas. Julian's pregnant. Handshaking, Tang stubbed the cigarette out in disbelief. Wait, he's the one you mentioned on the phone? Julian, yes. Lucas, what phone? Tang didn't want to talk to Lucas. He muttered, the ring. Midnight. Horror call. Well, funny you mention that, Lucas chimed in. Julian did want to watch. The Ring. I watched it with him. You? Julian, you hate watching movies with people, Tang exclaimed. Julian. True. He just liked watching Lucas jump at every scare. Naturally, Julian would never admit that. And Lucas, who had braved the horror for one smile, wasn't about to spill either. Instead, he smiled and said, that's because to him, I'm not just people. Tang clenched his fists. Screw you both. Later, stuffed with giant red envelopes from both sides, Tang stormed. Out. Big deal. I'll have my mom set me up with a date right now. Julian laughed and walked him to the door. A minute later, he got a text. If he ever fights with you again, tell me. I'll bring a stick. Also, best wishes. Somehow that best wishes felt like a threat. But dating wasn't just about horror movies. They watched surgery, footage, did case reviews, explored restaurants across the city, took long walks by the river, rode the entire sightseeing bus route, and kissed under a hidden archway at a university, making up for lost time. And on their rare days off, they drove out to the city outskirts, where Julian rediscovered his love for photography. There was a plum grove there, vast and quiet after snowfall. Julian had never imagined that one day he'd walk through it wrapped in a thick scarf, gloved hand entwined with another, his partner smiling. Beside him, lugging camera gear, they sat in a red-tiled gazebo, soaking in the winter sun. Lucas set the camera down, wiped sweat from his brow. Julian reached over, fanning him with his hand. A nearby toddler watched them for a long time, then ran over and collapsed into Julian's lap. Julian blinked. The boy pointed to his belly. There's a baby sister in there. His grandma rushed over, flustered. Sorry. He doesn't know better. Just nonsense. She turned to the boy. Don't say things like that. These are two uncles. Men can't have babies. I'm not wrong, the boy shouted. There is a baby sister. Julian's coat was thick. It shouldn't have been obvious. He exchanged a look with Lucas. Lucas coughed, grinning. Julian pinched his arm. Lucas turned to the child. No baby here. If you're looking for a baby. Sister? She's over here. The kid looked between them, then climbed into Lucas's lap. Really? Really? Want to feel? Lucas teased. The grandma chuckled. You're both so good with kids. Most young men aren't. You're naturals. Lucas glanced at Julian and grinned. I've had practice. Gotta keep one. Very stubborn person happy all day. Julian shot him a glare. Lucas squeezed his hand under the coat, fingers drawing circles in his palm. Though we'll have a kid of our own soon. The grandma smiled. Oh, boy or girl? Lucas replied smoothly. We don't know yet. Hospital won't tell. Well, no need for that, she said, pulling out a tiny book. My family's used this for generations. All I need is the date, and I can tell you right now. She shoved it into Lucas's pocket before he could protest, then had to rush off when the boy got bored again. As the gazebo fell quiet, Julian stood. Let's nap in the car. The grove was nearly empty. Their car was parked in a deserted lot. Nearby, Julian fell asleep in the back seat, head resting on Lucas's leg. When he woke up, Lucas was reading the little gender-predicting book. You're really using that? Julian asked, groggy. She seemed convinced. Why not? Give it. Nope. Lucas held it high. So, which day was it? Julian reached for it but sat up too fast. Pain shot through his back. Lucas caught him. What's wrong? Back pain. For how long? Lucas's face darkened. Why didn't you tell me? Julian shook his head. Lucas gently pulled him onto his lap. You don't have to be strong all the time, he whispered. You can lean on me, Julian. Strong hands massaged gently at the base of his spine, releasing the pressure. Julian leaned into him, head tucked under his chin. 20 minutes later, Lucas was sweaty and breathless. Still hurt? Julian had forgotten the pain entirely. Lucas misread the silence and kept going. Julian flushed. Maybe take a break. I'm good. Lucas smiled. Just a little sore. But you let me help. You trusted me. That makes me happy. His breath brushed Julian's neck. Julian flinched. Lucas hit a spot. Julian jolted. They both froze. Lucas hesitated, then pressed again. Julian bit his lip. What are you doing? He hissed, voice uneven. Massage. Let go. Lucas didn't. Instead, he traced downward. Julian went stiff. First time Lucas had ever seen Julian react like that. Awake, alert, visibly affected. Does this help the pain? Lucas asked carefully. You've already started, Julian growled. Should I continue? The lot was empty. The car was secluded. The air was heavy with winter. Blooms. Julian turned his face away. Just be quick. Long coats hid everything. Tinted windows blocked the world. The scent of plum blossoms clung to the snow. Afterward, Julian threw open the door, flushed, masked, and bolted. Lucas cleaned up, tossed the tissues, and looked up. Julian was already gone. Slow down, he called. Don't trip. Julian didn't look back. All he could think was, I'm a law-abiding, drama-free, model citizen. How the hell did I end up on his lap doing that? While pregnant, I've been possessed. That wasn't me. Behind him, Lucas ran to catch up, only to bump into the boy's grandma. Again, your friend just ran by, she said. You two have a fight? Lucas sighed. Worse, I think. And up in the trees, the plum blossoms swayed silently in the wind, basking in the sun, witnessing it all. After they came back from the plum grove, Julian Grant stopped talking. To him, Lucas Shaw was both frustrated and helpless. He wrote countless apologies, said all the right things, but still ended up back on the couch. Every night. On the fourth night of his exile, Julian was reading medical journals in bed when Lucas crept in, clutching a tablet. Julian shot him a frosty look. Out. I found a game you'll like, Lucas said, slinking in and slipping the tablet into Julian's hands. Julian glanced down. It was the same game they'd played before. He frowned and moved to toss it aside, but Lucas grabbed his hand. Just try it. He reached around from behind, arms encircling Julian, and steered the game character back to the newbie village. Then he quickly tapped the screen to challenge the village chief again. Julian raised an eyebrow and hit a couple of skills. To his surprise, the spider boss dropped instantly, like a bad extra in a low-budget movie. What did you do to it? Lucas beamed. I paid for it. Julian. So it wasn't starving. It was stuffed. I wanted to thank the game for bringing us together, Lucas explained. I topped up 520 yen, and the system just showered me with gear and power. UPS. That's how this happened. Lucas had spent 520, but Julian now felt like he was the fool. He recalled how hard they'd worked just to beat that damn spider the first time, and was grumpy for a full 30 seconds before throwing the tablet back. If anything, he looked even more annoyed now. And Lucas, in a tragic display of poor timing, asked, By the way, how's your back been? Ever since that little incident in the plum grove, the phrase pelvic and sacral pain gave Julian literal PTSD. Every time he felt a twinge, it reminded him of winter air, plum blossoms, and utter loss of control. Then he'd flush, feel guilty, and promptly forget the pain altogether. The nerve pain, apparently humiliated by the experience, never came back, which somehow only made Julian even more irritated. He'd told countless patients that nerve-related pain was subjective, emotional, and hard to treat, sometimes bordering on the mystical. And now he knew firsthand just how mystical it could be, and how humiliating. Lucas, trying to salvage his reputation, remembered what the grandma in the park had said about pregnant people needing sunshine and offered nervously, "Want to go out for some sun this week?" Julian kicked him out. That night, of course, the nerve pain came back. It crept in slowly at first. Julian ignored it, thinking it would pass. But it didn't. It got worse. He sat up in bed, expression dark, not sure whether to blame Lucas for jinxing it or himself for being careless. Wrapped in a robe, slippers shuffling, he padded into the living room and stared at Lucas, blissfully asleep on the couch. After a moment, Julian tugged him aside, climbed in between him and the back of the couch, and curled up against him from behind. Like magic, the pain eased. Julian stared at the ceiling, betrayed even by his own pain receptors. He had never felt more wronged. The next morning, Lucas woke up groggy to his alarm, disoriented. Half of him felt grounded, the other half like it was floating. Like he was, crammed into a fighter jet cockpit. Normal, right? He was dreaming about flying, but his hands couldn't find the controls. After fumbling for them, the steering wheel spoke. "You done groping?" Lucas jolted awake and found himself nose to nose with Julian. "You sleepwalked?" He yelped. Julian, fully awake and refreshed, kicked him off the couch and headed to the bathroom without a word. Lucas hit the floor. Hard. Blankets tangled. Brain fog thick. What the hell just happened? Whatever Julian's logic, from that day on, Lucas was allowed back in the bedroom. More than that, Julian clung to him in his sleep. It used to be a 70-30 split. Julian cuddled the pink bunny 70% of the time. Lucas, 30%. Now it was flipped. And Lucas, seeing that bunny on the bed, sometimes felt it was giving him a tragic, jealous glare, like a royal consort dethroned by a new favorite. He turned it to face the wall and told it smugly, "Grown-ups are talking. Look away, S-country." 9 a.m. Dr. Albert's surgery had officially begun. The OB/GYN conference room at Jiwa Hospital was packed. Julian walked in with his notebook, greeted Director Monroe, and took his usual front row seat. Due to patient privacy regulations, there were only 2 live feed angles. One focused on the surgical field, the other on the ECG monitor. Dr. Albert gave a brief overview. The OR fell silent. Julian opened his notes, gaze steady. Everyone knew the stakes, the risk. Even whispers were hushed. The cesarean went smoothly. Within 30 minutes, the baby was delivered, safely. But Julian and Lucas had always agreed, the hardest part wasn't the delivery, it was what came next: uterus and adnexa removal. Unlike most humans, this patient had 2 internal reproductive systems. That meant every organ, every blood vessel could be displaced, especially with the constraints of a narrow male pelvis. Even more critically, this patient's reproductive system was highly developed, with complex blood and nerve supply. Enough to support a full-term pregnancy, which meant a surgical nightmare. If the internal arrangement didn't deviate too much, a skilled surgeon might manage by adapting existing knowledge. But if it deviated too far, then it was like asking a child to solve graduate-level calculus. Compared to Dr. Ken, Dr. Albert was having worse luck. As soon as he started assessing the uterus and ovaries, Julian's expression changed. The live feed didn't show Albert's face, but Julian could imagine it was just as grim. The internal structure was a mess. Adhesions, twisted vessels, organs, overlapping unpredictably, like a city with no map, roads tangled beyond recognition. In such cases, best practice was to skip the uterus and focus on ovary removal. Since hormones mainly came from the ovaries, Albert, clearly overwhelmed, began closing the uterus and pivoted to the ovaries, but even those were buried in dense, fragile vascular networks. Time dragged. Albert asked for sweat wipes repeatedly. Julian's own palms were clammy. When he finally removed the first ovary cleanly, the entire room exhaled. Julian instinctively glanced at Lucas, only to see Lucas looking back. Their eyes met across the table, then dropped back to the screen. Just a glance. But somehow, Julian felt steadier. If Albert had managed one side, the other should follow. The doctors relaxed a bit. Water bottles cracked open, notes resumed. The tension began to ease. Then, a sudden shout. The heart monitor feed went black. Seconds later, the surgical feed cut too. The screen went dark. The room fell into stunned silence. They didn't know what had happened, but they all guessed the same thing. Something had gone very, very wrong. Julian looked down at his notes, dense, meticulous, and felt his heart race. Even though he tried not to think it, his mind veered toward the worst. Voices buzzed around him. Someone tried to fix the feed, no luck. The IT tech simply shook his head. "All links are down," someone announced. "It's not just us." The room turned chaotic. Chatter rose. Julian's temples throbbed. He stood up, dizzy, intending to wash his face. But before he reached the door, someone pulled him into a hug from behind. His body stiffened, but only for a second. Then he melted into the embrace. It was a scent he knew well, a body he trusted. Lucas. Julian clutched his coat, hands trembling slightly, like a drowning man. Grabbing for a reed, Lucas stroked his back gently, whispering, "It's okay. It's okay. Don't be afraid." Julian leaned his chin on Lucas's shoulder, closed his eyes, and shook his head. 12 hours later, the room's lights were still on. The screen remained black. Lucas held the back of Julian's neck, hugging him tightly, never once letting his own fear show. In Julian Grant's bedroom, two doctors sat shoulder to shoulder against the headboard, scrolling through the internet, combing for any scrap of news on Dr. Albert or that surgery. It had been 3 days. 3 days since the operation, and not a word had emerged from S country, with all eyes worldwide watching after Dr. Albert's dramatic announcements. Speculation was rampant. People questioned whether the surgery had failed, whether the patient had survived. Some had even begun to doubt the medical system of S country altogether. The rumors multiplied. The government said nothing. Dr. Albert disappeared, deleting all social accounts, vanishing as though swallowed by the earth. Some claimed he'd been arrested for disgracing his country. Others said he'd fled abroad, unable to face the shame, the truth of what happened. After that fateful operation, no one knew. S country ignored even the joint appeals from international medical organizations, offering no explanation. "I want to go find him," Lucas Shaw suddenly said, setting down his tablet. "You think you can?" Julian asked. "I don't know," Lucas replied. "But he once gave me a private address, said I could visit anytime. If he hasn't left the country, there's still a chance." Back when Albert had first announced the surgery, Lucas had actively corresponded with him. He was good at charming people, and Albert, proud but craving understanding, had quickly labeled Lucas a kindred spirit. Their conversations, though few, were enough for Albert to drop his countryside villa address, inviting Lucas to visit. After the surgery went dark, Lucas tried everything: calls, emails, mutual contacts. But Albert was unreachable. "I have to try," he said. "Even if he failed, I need to know how. What went wrong that day?" Success stories were rare, but failures, those had to be studied even more carefully. "I already have a visa," told Director Monroe today. "She knows why I'm going and approved 5 days off." He slipped his arm around Julian. "I'll be back soon, okay?" Julian blinked, and suddenly realized, since they moved in together, they hadn't been apart this long. not even after the robbery incident. Lucas had raced home in under 3 days. A pause. Then Julian said, "It's okay. If 5 days isn't enough, stay 7 or 2 weeks. I'll handle things with Director Monroe. She said I could extend if needed. Worst case, they dock my pay. Don't worry." Lucas gazed into his eyes. 7 days. No matter what, I'll be back. Julian looked down and nodded slowly. After a moment he added, "Tell me once your flight's booked. I'll drive you to the airport. There aren't many flights over there. Times are rough." I asked Zhang Cheng to take me. "The airport's far. You shouldn't exhaust yourself." Julian leaned into his neck. Still, maybe it was the last trip that left a shadow, or maybe the uncertainty this time ran deeper. Either way, Julian didn't sleep well for days. Winter deepened. The sky grew lighter. Later, when Lucas left that morning, it was still dark. He moved quietly even, changing in the hallway to avoid waking Julian. He'd told him not to see him off. But Julian woke the moment he felt the bed grow cold. Instinct. He wrapped himself in a robe, stepped out, just as Lucas, suitcase in hand, reached for the door. Lucas hadn't turned on the lights. Even the living room was dim. Afraid any glow would seep under the bedroom door. They faced each other in that soft half-light, their shadows long and blending on the floor. Julian had dressed hastily, too lightly. He'd even put his slippers on the wrong feet. The early light silhouetted him, and his rounded belly stood out in sharp relief. The world was quiet. A single bird call echoed in the air. Lucas hesitated only a second, then dropped his suitcase and rushed back to pull Julian into a hug. And Julian didn't stop him. The longer the embrace, the harder it was to let go. But the sun always rises. Eventually, the light grew clearer. Shadows sharpened. Lucas, slowly, stepped back. "Go rest a bit longer," he whispered. "I have to go." Julian looked down at Lucas's open coat. No wonder he'd felt so warm. He reached up and carefully buttoned each toggle, then tugged him close. On tiptoe, he pressed a kiss to Lucas's forehead. "Travel safe." Lucas carried those words with him across oceans. Even when his flight landed in S country, his chest still burned with warmth. Snow dusted his hair as he stepped out. He tugged his scarf tighter and went straight to the hospital where Albert used to work, only to learn Albert had resigned. When he asked about the patient, they refused to disclose anything. Lucas tried the villa. The red-roofed house sat in silence. No lights, no movement. He knocked, no answer. For a full day, he went door to door in the neighborhood. Finally, a gardener offered a sliver of hope. 3 people were here 2 days ago. The man wasn't sure if they lived there. He was new. Said the villa was used as a weekend retreat. Rumors said Albert's city home had been vandalized, graffiti everywhere, curses on the walls. The villa, secluded and largely unknown, had remained untouched. It was the only lead Lucas had, so he rented a room across the street, one with a clear view of the front gate, and began his stakeout. When Julian called that evening, Lucas was gnawing on a piece of bread. The moment Julian's face appeared on video, Lucas lit up. "You used to joke I should be a debt collector. Guess what? I'm basically there." Julian didn't laugh. He saw the dark circles under Lucas's eyes. But Lucas only smiled. "How have you been? Any discomfort?" Julian didn't answer, then asked, "Did you call my parents?" The day Lucas left, Julian's mom had called, saying she and his dad were taking time off to visit. They were now at his place, watching TV while Julian hid on the balcony to make this call. They hadn't asked about Lucas once. Julian had a good guess why. Lucas admitted, "I asked them to check on you. Since I'd be away, I'm not a kid," Julian muttered. "But you've got a kid in you," Lucas teased. "Someone has to take care of you while you take care of her." Then he sighed. "Your dad gave me hell on the phone, said I was irresponsible for leaving while you're pregnant. Almost called me deadbeat. And your mom, she knows about Albert's surgery. She kept asking if yours might go wrong too. Julian looked back at the living room, then at the lights across the city skyline. They yelled at me too. What? Why? Lucas looked stunned. Julian hesitated. I told them about us. Lucas froze. Now? Why? They were already talking about you. So I just said it. Julian's tone was calm. They were mad. But now they're fine. Maybe after the shock of a pregnant son, a male partner didn't seem so outrageous. They want to have dinner with you when you're back. A trap dinner? Lucas joked. Should I bring backup? Maybe a strategist? No strategist, Julian murmured, fingers drumming the railing. Only Julian Grant. Then I'll bring Julian Grant. Lucas smiled at the screen. Julian is my strategist. Tell him to send my regards to our future in-laws. Julian narrowed his eyes. Whose in-laws? Lucas just grinned. After a while, Julian looked up at the hazy moon. Can you see the moon over there? Yeah. Lucas looked skyward. But they say foreign moons are rounder. Doesn't look it to me. 7-hour time difference. Not short, not long. One watching the moon rise, the other watching it fade. Julian thought their generational gap might be wider than the time zone. He wanted to say, we share this moon. Lucas cracked a joke about Western worship. So Julian opened up just a little more. I dreamed last night that Smiley could talk. She asked where you went. Lucas chuckled. Tell her to dream me herself next time. Julian rolled his eyes. Finally, Lucas sobered. Put the phone to your ear. I have a secret. Julian did. And heard. I miss you too. Low, warm, like a secret whispered directly into his ear. Julian's ears turned red. His heart stuttered. Then, realizing the cheeky "too" was meant to expose him, he snapped, I don't miss you, and hung up. Lucas laughed, tucked the phone away, and took another bite of his bread. But then he paused. Out the window, in the shadows of the night, a black sedan slowly pulled into Dr. Albert's villa. Lucas Shaw dropped his water and half-eaten bread on the table, muttering something about Julian Grant being his lucky charm as he bolted out of the building. A black sedan had just pulled up in front of the villa. 3 people got out. The last to emerge, even with a mask, was unmistakably Dr. Albert, his light brown hair catching the moonlight, his features vaguely visible. Without hesitation, Lucas called out, Dr. Albert! Startled, Albert turned. He hadn't expected anyone to be lurking near his villa at this hour. The 2 men in black suits who'd exited before him quickly stepped in front of him, adopting a protective stance. Are you? They both asked sharply. Lucas slowed his pace and turned on his phone's flashlight as he approached, step by cautious step. As soon as Albert recognized his face, he gasped. Lucas? What are you doing here? The 2 guards exchanged glances. Albert waved them off. It's fine. He's a friend from Z country. He gestured to the men in black. These are my bodyguards. Bodyguards? Albert gave a resigned nod. Yes. He led Lucas inside the villa and pointed to the couch. Have a seat. The guards followed them in. One stayed near Albert, the other swept through the house to check every room. Once the sweep was done, they both took up posts by the entrance, giving the doctor space to speak. Privately, Albert slumped into the sofa, tugging at his tie and crossing his legs, clearly worn out despite his nonchalant posture. You've been watching my house this whole time? He asked. Lucas didn't waste time. Yes. I came to ask what happened after the live stream cut out. Albert raised a brow, chuckling dryly. That's not like you, Lucas. This is the first time you've been so direct. I thought you'd at least pretend to. Ask about my health, or say you were worried about me." Lucas paused, realizing he had come on too strong. But Albert waved it off. "It's fine. Let's pretend you came for me. I haven't seen any of my friends since it happened. I was supposed to be hosting a celebration tonight. My violinist friend would have popped a bottle of champagne." He glanced around the empty room and gave a self-deprecating shrug. "But here we are. No party, no violin, no champagne." Lucas remained silent. Sometimes, silence was the only kindness one could offer a proud man who'd just fallen hard. Finally, Albert let out a long sigh and said quietly, "It was a blood clot. Due to fetal compression during pregnancy, the patient developed venous thrombosis. After the ovary removal, the intense vascular reconnection caused the clot to worsen. The anticoagulants we'd prepared in advance weren't enough. Then, once the baby was delivered and the pressure on the vessels lifted, the clot shot loose like a wild horse." He tapped his chest and hit the lungs. "Is he still alive?" Lucas asked. "Alive, but comatose. Pulmonary embolisms can severely limit oxygen exchange. Even a brief period of oxygen deprivation can cause lasting damage to the brain." Albert continued, "My recklessness caused embarrassment to my country. The government ordered me not to disclose any details. And you're smart enough to know why." "You're waiting for him to wake up," Lucas said. Albert nodded. Country wasn't exactly a major global player, but now, thanks to the debacle surrounding this surgery, the entire world was watching. When Albert had insisted on broadcasting the operation live, critics had swarmed. Many felt Country was being irresponsible by allowing such an unfit candidate to attempt pregnancy. Now, his failure had only added fuel to the fire. Some foreign governments were even starting to meddle in Country's internal policies. Their only hope to ease the storm, for the patient to recover, speak to the media, and show that things weren't as catastrophic as they seemed. "Lucas," Albert said, "I know you came to learn from this case, but if there's anything I can teach you now, it's this. Don't perform this surgery." Lucas hadn't expected those words from the man who had once brimmed with confidence. Albert clasped his hands loosely, weariness etched into every line of his face. "You saw the first half of the surgery. The rest of the world doesn't get it, but you should. My patient and Ken's patient weren't even in the same league. This surgery was a gamble. No matter how thorough the pre-op evaluations were, you could never fully predict what would happen after you cut open the body. And the public didn't care about surgical complexity. They only knew Ken succeeded. Albert failed. You're a top-tier doctor, Lucas," Albert said. "But the reality is brutal. For 10 years I was chief surgeon. Not a single patient of mine died in surgery. I was a prodigy. In my country, they called me a genius." He scoffed bitterly, and I believed him. I thought I could shock the whole world. But now I know, no one, not even a genius, is invincible. "I don't believe in God," Lucas said. "You don't have to. But don't believe in yourself too much either." Albert looked utterly defeated. He brewed himself a pot of black coffee and poured Lucas a cup. "Got any sugar?" Lucas asked. "No," Albert said. "Bitterness clears the mind. I think I've had too much sweet coffee in my life." Lucas took a sip. Sour. He set it down. Albert, meanwhile, drank like it was water, one cup after another. "You visit my city house?" he asked. "I'm practically a public enemy now. I live at the hospital. They only let me back here under the excuse of fetching documents." He nodded toward the guards. "They're government-assigned protection, they say. More like surveillance." He tapped his ear. "They've got mics in their headsets. They're listening to us right now," then shrugged. "But I don't care anymore. They've frozen my accounts. I'm like a lab rat in a cage. I can't even leave the country. If my patient wakes up, I get my freedom back. If he dies, I'll be the scapegoat." Albert wiped his eyes. Just a little. I did the artificial insemination myself. If he dies, I'll never forgive. Myself? He chuckled darkly. Maybe your country wouldn't do this to you. Maybe, if you keep your head down, you'll avoid this fate. But remember, Lucas, failure has consequences. This surgery is not as simple as we imagined. Lucas didn't respond. Albert studied him. I know you came for knowledge, but for the fact that you still visited me. During all this, I'll give you a piece of advice. Let your patient go to Ken. Instead, he's the best in M country, has the finest equipment, and he's already succeeded once. God damn it. I can't believe I'm praising him. Albert raked a hand through his hair in frustration. I hate Ken. I hate him. Lucas noticed. His light brown hair was now threaded with white. Where is the patient? He asked. Transferred to another hospital, Albert replied. Want to see him? Lucas thought for a long moment, then said, yes. Dr. Albert's patient was named Mr. Baker. That night, Lucas, Shaw, and Albert, accompanied by bodyguards, drove straight to the hospital where Baker was being treated. Rumor had it that Mr. Baker was incredibly wealthy, owning countless companies and ranking among the top business elites of S country. Initially, Albert had refused Mr. Baker's repeated requests to undergo artificial pregnancy, but after being offered massive research funding, Albert had wavered and ultimately agreed to attempt the surgery. The hospital where Baker was now receiving care was, not surprisingly, one of the many in which he held shares. He was the only patient in the special VIP ICU suite. But unexpectedly, sitting just outside the room was a woman. She didn't look like medical staff, dressed elegantly but looking haggard. It was clear she hadn't slept in a long time. When she saw them, she stood, managed a polite smile, and greeted. Albert. Albert gestured toward Lucas. This is a colleague of mine. He'd like to visit Mr. Baker. Would that be all right? Lucas gave her a courteous nod. Her eyes lingered on him for a brief second before returning a composed smile. Of course. After going through extensive disinfection protocols, Lucas and Albert stood at Mr. Baker's bedside. The man had golden hair and a face that, rather than a businessman's, looked more like an artist's. But now his body was entangled in tubes, surrounded by machines of all kinds. In the center of the sterile ICU room, he seemed so frail, like a porcelain vase on the verge of shattering. Reading about failed surgeries in journals wasn't the same as witnessing one in real life. Now the failed patient was lying in front of Lucas, unconscious, uncertain to live or die. Suddenly, his limbs felt cold. Baker's skin was pale. Julian's skin was pale too. The visual struck deep. For one terrifying moment, Lucas imagined Julian lying in this very bed. Albert gently lifted the blanket to show Lucas the measures being used to keep Baker alive. His abdomen was still distended from the pregnancy, skin and muscles, yet to recover. The incision and stitches were clear, a small opening on the side of his abdomen drained yellow fluid into a clear plastic bag. Lucas had seen this kind of body before. He'd performed countless surgeries, inserted drain tubes, sutured wounds, dissected abdomens, and uteruses, but this was the first time a patient's body filled him with fear. Because of Julian, he silently followed Albert, his steps slow and unsteady, mind buzzing, until Albert clapped a hand on his shoulder. You didn't hear what I just said? Albert asked. Lucas, dazed, replied, What? I asked when you're going back, Albert repeated, clearly impatient. If you need a few more days, stay at my place. I probably won't be around much. I need to sit for a bit. Lucas's legs were trembling. I'll go back later. Don't trouble yourself. Fine. Albert shrugged and shot a glance at the two guards. I'm off. Then, gotta figure out how to save that poor bastard. As he turned, he patted Lucas on the shoulder. Remember what I said. You're a good doctor. You have a bright future. Don't throw it away on One surgery like I did. Lucas looked down. But he's someone I care about. Then all the more reason you shouldn't do it. Albert looked back, through the ICU glass, then at the woman waiting outside. His voice dropped. Unless you're prepared to be the one who puts him in there. With that, he turned and walked away. Lucas stood there, stunned, for a long time. Finally, pale and trembling, he slumped into the chair outside the ICU. The woman beside him, noticing his state, cautiously said, "Excuse me, sir?" He wasn't in the mood to talk, but her voice was so gentle, so earnest, he couldn't bring himself to refuse. He lowered his hand from his brow and asked, "What is it?" "I'm Mr. Baker's wife. You can call me Daisy," she introduced herself. Lucas's lashes fluttered faintly. He'd assumed Baker was unmarried, or perhaps gay. Albert had said he insisted on carrying a child himself, even though Daisy had been at his side. Lucas had assumed she was a sister or assistant. He hadn't expected her to be his wife. "Were you sent by Dr. Albert?" Daisy asked tentatively. "You saw my husband. Do you think he'll wake up?" Lucas had seen that expression before. Different countries, faces, skin tones, yet families of critically ill patients always wore the same look. It made one want to say, "He'll be fine," but anyone could say that, except the doctor. A doctor had to be accountable for every word. So all Lucas could say was, "I'm sorry, I can't promise anything. I'm just a visiting doctor here to learn from Dr. Albert." Maybe she'd heard that kind of response too many times. Daisy didn't. Looked disappointed. "I understand. Sorry to trouble you." Lucas nodded politely. "Not at all." They sat in silence, separated by a seat. The private ICU was quiet, apart from the soft footfalls of staff. There was no other sound. Maybe Daisy had been holding it in too long. Maybe Lucas, a stranger, who understood, offered just the right amount of detachment and empathy. About 30 minutes later, she broke the silence. Dr. Albert's surgery failed, but before him, Professor Ken from MA country succeeded with a similar case. Perhaps you should seek him out. I know. She blinked, confused. Then why did you come here instead? I've studied Ken's case thoroughly, Lucas said. But as for private instruction, he doesn't take kindly to being disturbed. Albert's experience is valuable too, he added. The cases are rare. Each one is precious. If there are 100 reasons this surgery could fail, the more I know, the better my odds. Even if it's just from 1 in 100 to 2 in 100, it's worth it. Daisy said nothing for a while. Then she sighed. I wish I were Ken, or you, or anyone with a medical license. At least, then, I could try something. Instead, I can only sit here and wait. Lucas was quiet, then said, My patient is also my partner. A man? A man. Surprised, Daisy's expression shifted. Her deep blue eyes filled with unspoken emotion. After a moment, she pulled out a photo. This is our child. The baby's face was wrinkled, but adorable. He's healthy, Lucas said. She smiled faintly. It was the first genuine smile he'd seen on her. She added, My husband gave birth to him, even suspecting it. Hearing it confirmed still stunned Lucas. Some truths weigh more when spoken aloud. Daisy's long-held sorrow finally found its release. I always wanted a child, but after years of trying and eventually being diagnosed with endometrial cancer, I had to have my uterus removed. She said, My husband comforted me, said we'd still be happy without children. Slowly, I gave up the dream, though I still envied others and grumbled about it. Then one day, he had rectal bleeding. We thought it was cancer, but the doctor said it wasn't cancer. It was menstruation. She paused, voice soft and sorrowful. A uterus had developed inside. He sought out Dr. Albert, told me we could have a baby with his body, and we were happy. Like any couple waiting for a child, but he never told me how risky it was. Daisy looked pained. He didn't understand. I only wanted a child with him because I love him. If he'd stayed safe, I wouldn't have minded not having a baby. If I'd known the risk, I'd never have agreed. He's a businessman. He should have understood risk. She looked at the baby photo again. Everyone who knows what he did thinks he's insane. And in that moment, Lucas finally understood what Albert had meant. Unless you're prepared to be the one who puts him in there, guilt could devour you, could devour him. When Lucas left the hospital, he gave Daisy all his tissues, but they weren't enough. He ended up making her a saltwater solution to prevent electrolyte imbalance from the crying. He returned to the villa, canceled his short-term lease in S Country, and sent Albert an email to thank him. Then, through thick snow, he walked slowly toward the taxi stand. Each step crunched. Snow soaked his boots. Cold climbed up his spine. The scent of snow lingered in the air. When he closed his eyes, he saw Daisy's deep blue eyes, drenched in sorrow. Back in a city, Julian was about to review a student's experiment. Biology experiments were notoriously finicky. After 2 months, the student still hadn't gotten consistent results. Frustrated, Julian dragged him to the office for a talk, but just as he was about to begin, his phone rang. Seeing the caller ID, he stood and gestured for the student to check the PPT again. Review your slides. You'll be presenting in English. No, reading off the script. Then he stepped outside to answer the call. Hello? Julian. The voice on the other end sounded hollow, like it came from an empty field. Julian felt a chill, as though Lucas were calling from a snow-covered wilderness. What's wrong? He asked, sensing something off. There was a long silence. Then, Lucas sniffled. I'm sorry, Julian. I'm so sorry. Julian's eyelids twitched. He looked down from the Jua Tower. Patients bustled below, some in wheelchairs, some with IV stands, others covered in sheets. Destination unknown. He didn't know what Lucas had been through, but he knew what he meant. They always had this unspoken rhythm. When one broke down, the other held steady. Julian's hand trembled slightly around the phone. He inhaled deeply, then steadied it with his other hand. If not for that night, I'd still be facing a dangerous hysterectomy a few months later, he said. This would have happened regardless. It's not your fault, and you already apologized. Repeating it over and over only makes me question my memory. I don't want to hear sorry again, he said quietly. If you must say something, say, I love you instead. Then he hung up, returned to his office, and picked up his tea. The warmth steadied his shaking fingers. Across from him, the nervous student had just finished loading his slides. Julian nodded. Go ahead. The student stammered through his presentation, sweating, but the data was clear. The experiment had worked. Julian raised an eyebrow. When did you finish this? The student blinked. A few days ago. I reviewed my old lab notes, found a few variables, adjusted, and repeated until it worked. Julian stared at him, then unexpectedly raised his phone and snapped a photo of the slide. Mind if I send your success to a very dumb student of mine? He asked. The student, usually a cautionary tale, blinked. Sure? Julian typed quickly. A month ago, one of my second-year grad students cried, swearing this experiment was impossible and begged to drop it. Today, he succeeded. So, Professor Shen, are you going to cry too? When the not-so-smart student returned, Julian Grant's parents had already left. The two met at the hospital. Julian was rushing to a consultation with another department. The elevator was packed, and in his hurry he took the stairs, only to run into Lucas Shaw, who happened to be coming up. After a few days apart, they caught sight of each other in the stairwell, and stopped at the same time. Lucas, standing a few steps below, looked up at Julian. His, usually, impassive face lit up with a smile the moment he saw him. Spreading his arms, he said with a soft glint in his eyes. Hug? Julian's heart ached inexplicably. At the sound of Lucas's voice, he jogged down a few steps, and before he could reach him fully, Lucas had already come up and pulled him into a hug. Julian buried his face in Lucas's neck. Lucas whispered, "Didn't I tell you not to run? What if something happened?" Julian mumbled, "I was in a hurry for a consultation." There they stood, two doctors on different steps of the stairwell, sharing a fleeting 5-second embrace in the quiet, empty stairwell. As he stepped back, Julian stuffed 2 pieces of chocolate into Lucas's pocket. 2 pieces of chocolate that said everything he didn't. That evening, they met again in the parking lot. Julian sat in the passenger seat, listening as Lucas recounted the story of Dr. Albert and Mr. Baker. When he heard about Mr. Baker choosing to carry a child for the woman he loved, Julian turned his head and looked silently out the window at the darkening sky. Aside from the 2 messages he'd sent during the trip, Julian hadn't brought up the surgery again, but he knew that what he'd said wasn't enough to ease the blow Lucas had suffered from the S-Country experience. Since returning, Lucas hadn't shown any visible change. But at night, he began staying up late, reading, researching. Julian had tried to stop him a few times, but Lucas started sneaking out after Julian had fallen asleep, working quietly in the study. Sometimes, Julian would wake with a start at 3 or 4 a.m., reach out, and find the other side of the bed long cold. They had exhausted all available data on male pregnancy. Lucas even turned to obscure traditional medicine texts until Julian finally convinced him that all documented cases emerged after the year 2000, likely linked to environmental changes, at which point he stopped. Julian knew that Lucas was aware none of this would help, that this obsessive effort only burned him out. But Lucas was stuck in anxiety. Unable to cope, he sought relief in the illusion of action. Julian also knew that such futile effort only worsened the anxiety. Eventually, after Lucas lost 10 pounds in just a few days, Julian made up his mind and knocked him out with sleeping pills. "I've been so sleepy lately," Lucas murmured one night, fingers loosely twined with Julian's. "Every night, I just knock out and can't wake up." Julian sat against the headboard reading medical papers on a tablet. Lucas lay beside him, already fast asleep before he finished his sentence. Julian set the tablet aside, turned off the light, tucked the blanket around Lucas, and lay down to face him. Even after losing weight, Lucas's features remained striking. His cheeks were a bit sunken, dark circles under his eyes more pronounced. Julian reached out and traced his brow gently. It should have been an intimate gesture, but the man who now needed one sedative a night just to sleep wouldn't be waking to kiss him back. This couldn't go on, Julian thought. He couldn't keep drugging him. Lucas couldn't remain in this pain. After a long moment, Julian whispered, "Take a break, please." But the man in his arms was sound asleep and couldn't answer. In the end, Julian turned off the light and kissed the corner of Lucas's mouth, where it used to curl up with every smile. "You're going to have the surgery done by Ken?" Lucas asked, clearly stunned. Julian nodded. "I've thought it through. It'll be hard to protect my privacy. If I do it here, I'm thinking of going abroad, to Ken." It was a flimsy excuse. Lucas could have arranged privacy at home easily, but it was the only excuse Julian could use now, one that would ease Lucas's mind. It wasn't about blaming Lucas or doubting his skill. Julian knew Lucas was smart enough to see through the excuse, but kind enough to accept it anyway. Sure enough, Lucas was silent for a moment, then said, "I'll contact Ken. Let's start planning." The once bright Dr. Shaw lowered his eyes. His long lashes cast shadows that hid whatever he was feeling. "No rush," Julian said gently. Lucas nodded. Julian let out a quiet sigh of relief. Neither of them noticed that Lucas's fingers, clenched in his lap, had gone red from the pressure. Lucas's insomnia faded, and Julian no longer had to drug him. But soon after, Julian realized something else. Lucas was becoming overly careful around him, as if everything he said and did had been rehearsed 1,000 times before he dared act. Worse still, Lucas clearly thought he was hiding it well. Ken, who'd been unreachable before, replied to Lucas's email the moment they offered to pay. After Dr. Albert's bloody failure, the drama only boosted the mystique around Ken's success. His fame soared. He was no longer just Dr. Ken. He was the Dr. Ken. They scheduled a first meeting, exactly during the 3-day break. Director Monroe had once promised for overseas travel. Ken raised his surgical deposit to $600,000, non-refundable if the operation failed. If it succeeded, another $400,000 due. Lucas read the email calmly, replied with gratitude, and arranged to pay in person when they met in M country. When Lucas shared the news, Julian was speechless. He hadn't expected Lucas to go this far. He thought bringing up Ken would buy them time, give Lucas a break, let him heal mentally before deciding anything final. But Lucas had already negotiated the price and scheduled the trip. "What's the rush?" Julian asked. Lucas didn't answer then, but hours later, Julian received a message. "I don't know what else I can do for you." Julian stared at those words for a long time, and finally asked himself, had it been selfish of him to push for this relationship? Had he underestimated how fragile love could be under the weight of survival? There's an old saying, doctors don't treat themselves, and they don't treat loved ones well either, because when emotion is involved, logic slips. The hand that once cut confidently now hesitates, fearing too much or too little. Lucas loved him too much, and now Lucas was unraveling, quietly, destructively. Julian's guilt peaked the day Lucas dragged him to an ATM. They were out walking after dinner, laughing about something silly. Passing the bank, Lucas suddenly said, "Check my balance." Julian blinked, took his salary card, slid it in. What he saw made him freeze. "You rob a bank?" Lucas retrieved the card, slipped it into Julian's pocket. "I sold the house." Julian's heart dropped. "I told you not to." "It's okay," Lucas said, rubbing his shoulder. "Don't worry about it, Lucas." Lucas looked away. Julian narrowed his eyes. "That wasn't house money. I borrowed some from my brother. My parents wired me some when I said it was urgent. Friends helped too. Small amounts. 1 or 2,000 here and there." Lucas acted like it was nothing. But Julian knew how much it cost him to ask his family for help. He knew Lucas's past, the childhood neglect, the pride that came from building a life despite it. To go begging now? It must have shredded him. Inside, the ATM's mechanical voice warned, "Be alert. Someone may be tailing you." Julian looked at the man inches away, and suddenly the world went silent. Anger, guilt, doubt, pain, so many emotions tangled together. At last, Julian leaned against the machine and asked quietly, "Do you really think I'm only with you because I was moved by all this?" Lucas didn't answer. "Do you think that if you can't do the surgery, I'll stop loving you?" Still, no reply. Julian pushed. "You think I'm with you because you can make me safe? Provide a better life?" He lost control. "If that's true, then I should have picked Li Yale when he offered me half a damn water plant. Or maybe Wu Chengchun, who waved millions and said he'd fund my entire research career abroad." Lucas blinked. "Wait, those two were chasing you?" Julian choked. They were college roommates, rich kids, loud, flamboyant, and very into Julian. The whole class had known. Julian had only brought them up to piss Lucas off. He hadn't expected Lucas to be clueless. Years later, Lucas finally learned his best bros were his rivals. It explained a lot. The late-to-night crying, the drinking, the heartbreaks they refused to explain. Lucas used to comfort them with, "There's other fish in the sea," not knowing the fish was his. Fury sparked. How could they? Julian waited for the punchline. Some declaration, some fire, but Lucas just blinked, then muttered, "So why didn't you say yes?" Julian nearly passed out. Lucas Shaw, did someone in S country replace your brain? He stormed toward the exit, threw the card at Lucas, then turned back. "I'm staying at Tang Keys. Don't come find me unless you get your head straight." And with a dramatic slam of the ATM door, he was gone. "Oh, weren't you two all lovey-dovey not long ago? Already fighting? Again?" Tang Ki grinned as he teased Julian Grant, clearly enjoying the gossip. "I heard Li Yale's bought 4 or 5 properties in a city now. And Huo, Zhang Cheng might be moving back from overseas. Maybe you should hit them up. One's loaded, the other's got international connections. Who knows, they might even help you bargain with Dr. Ken for a cheaper surgery." Julian lay on Tang Ki's couch, rubbing his lower back. His coat hung open, revealing the curve of his baby bump under a black turtleneck. For some reason, the baby, Smiley, had been extra restless the past 2 days, bouncing around non-stop. Julian placed a calming hand on his belly and said flatly, "You've got nerves of steel. I kinda have to." Tang Ki shrugged. "You swing by my place every few days. I've got to keep my emotions steady for whenever you show up." He curled one leg up and sat next to Julian. "You know what's funny? Back in the day, Li Yale and Huo Chengchun went all out trying to keep their crushes on you a secret from Lucas. They bought the whole class cake and bubble tea and begged us to keep quiet. Only 2 people didn't get the memo, Lucas himself and you." Tang Ki smirked. "Bet they never imagined you'd be the one to rat them out to Lucas in the end." Julian was silent. Those 2 trust fund brats really had too much money and nowhere to spend it. He fastened his coat and pinched the bridge of his nose. "But seriously," Tang Ki said, his tone turning serious, "do you really trust Lucas?" Julian's fingers paused. He knew exactly what Tang Ki was questioning. Back when he and Lucas weren't romantically involved, Lucas had no emotional burden agreeing to perform the surgery. But now, as his partner, Lucas would be under unimaginable pressure on the operating table. Julian had seen this before. Doctors rarely operated on their own loved ones. Too much pressure, too easy to hesitate, too easy to make mistakes. One of the most important lessons his mentor had taught him: never operate on your family unless absolutely necessary. But when that absolutely necessary moment came, if you could perform the surgery and succeed, it meant you had truly mastered the skill, absorbed it into your bones. Julian had met many doctors in his life, peers and teachers alike. But only 2 had dared to perform surgery on their own family members. One removed his mother's cancer-ridden liver, the other his wife's cancerous uterus. Far more often, he'd seen senior surgeons too shaken to cut, swapping out mid-operation, or even waiting outside the OR, too distraught to enter. Based on all those examples, Julian should not trust Lucas. But when it came to this surgery, there was no one else he trusted. Albert had made it clear, the risks weren't just about the doctor. They depended heavily on the patient's condition. Even if Ken performed it, the outcome might not be any better. And Ken had suddenly jacked up the price, not just out of greed, but possibly out of fear. Maybe he knew his first success had some luck in it. Maybe he didn't feel confident anymore. Now that his reputation was sky high, he had more to lose than anyone. So yes, Lucas might hesitate because of their relationship, but Ken might hesitate because of his pride. Either way, Julian had no other options. Before Albert's failure, maybe a few daring colleagues might have stepped up. But now, no one would risk it. This wasn't just absolutely necessary. This was beyond that. And putting all logic aside, Julian trusted Lucas, because after more than 10 years of rivalry, no one knew Lucas's surgical skill or ability to handle pressure better than Julian. And more importantly, he loved him. Emotionally, he trusted Lucas with everything. If Lucas said he could do it, Julian would believe him. And if something went wrong, they'd face the consequences together. So when Zhang Cheng asked him that question, Julian answered simply, "If he dares to do it, I'll let him." Zhang Cheng was silent for a long time, then nodded. "If you believe in him, then give him a little more time. Lucas isn't that fragile. He might come around soon. He thinks I don't love him anymore," Julian murmured. "He even sold his house." "Julian, remember one thing," Zhang Cheng said. "People lose their heads when they care too much. That's true for both of you. You tried to protect him, and it scared him. You two are actually kind of similar. Back in school, when something felt impossible, you both insisted on proving it was possible. That's why you were always butting heads. I know you suggested Ken because you were trying to ease Lucas's stress, but come on. You know what kind of guy he is? He might act humble, but deep down, he's proud as hell. That pride's what kept him clashing with you for a decade. He was probably close to pulling himself together. But when you mentioned going to Ken, it hit him hard. He felt rejected, like you didn't believe in him anymore. You're anxious, he's anxious, it's a mess. But the house, whatever, let it go. Use the money for something else. You two don't need two homes. Anyway, and don't underestimate me. I may be single now, but I have been in a serious relationship." Zhang Cheng took on a rare older brother tone. "When you love someone too much, it's easy to feel insecure. And Lucas? He promised to do the surgery. Now that he's doubting himself, he probably feels worthless. Think about how you got together. You rejected him at first. Then he beat up Huang Bin for you. Then chased you all the way across M country, like a madman. Of course, he thinks you only said yes because you were moved. Now he feels useless. Of course he's afraid of losing you. If he thinks you don't love him enough, then make sure he knows you do. Compliment him, praise him, let him feel secure." Julian visibly resisted. That kind of open emotional expression wasn't easy for him. He lowered his lashes, skipped the advice, and simply said, "I didn't say yes because I was moved." "Of course not," Zhang Cheng replied. "You're way too proud for that. I knew. The second you told me about you two, you really like him. But love isn't just about feelings. There's friction, misunderstandings, rough edges. You gotta work through it. No one gets it perfect. If that weren't true, I'd be married by now, with a kid and a cozy little home instead of sitting here being your emotional support." Julian remembered Zhang Cheng's ex. She was lovely. They were planning the wedding. He was even supposed to be the best man. Then suddenly, it ended. Zhang Cheng said her PhD advisor kept delaying her graduation, and the stress started to build. Meanwhile, he was working overtime trying to save for a house. They drifted apart. Then one day she said, "Maybe we shouldn't get married." They'd broken up because of marriage. Back then, Zhang Cheng practically lived at Julian's place, crying into his shoulder, analyzing every hour of the last 3 months, trying to figure out where it all went wrong. "Communication matters more than anything," he said now. "You told me that back then. Funny how easy it is to forget the basics when you're the one in love." Zhang Cheng figured that was enough lecturing for one day. He got up to get a glass of water, but the doorbell rang before he could take a sip. Julian froze, looked up, then looked away. Zhang Cheng glanced at the screen. "He's here. I wasn't waiting for him," Julian said stiffly. "You didn't even pack a bag," Zhang Cheng smirked. "You're clearly waiting." "Julian, you think maybe he brought your suitcase?" Logically, Zhang Cheng knew that was unlikely. But given how erratic Lucas had been lately, anything was possible. Julian tensed as Zhang Cheng opened the door. Thankfully, Lucas wasn't holding a suitcase, just a box of fruit. "Look at that," Zhang Cheng smiled, accepting it like a proud parent. "Shows up bearing gifts. That's how you do it." He clapped Julian on the back. "All right, go home. I'm going to bed." Julian glanced at Lucas. Lucas avoided his gaze at first, then looked back, quietly asking, "Coming home? We've got fruit, apples, durian too." Zhang Cheng didn't understand the code they were speaking in, but Julian did. He stepped forward, then said, "I don't eat durian." Maybe they didn't know how to start this conversation. Maybe they just needed the walk home as a buffer. Neither spoke in the car or in the elevator. They walked side by side, close but silent. Then, as the elevator doors closed, Julian reached over and took Lucas's. Lucas's self-control shattered. He turned and wrapped Julian in a tight hug, burying his face in his neck. It felt like every nerve in his body had been soaking in lemon juice, stinging, raw, and weirdly alive. They didn't get out at the 12th floor the first time. The elevator returned to the ground floor empty. The second time, they finally stepped out. Inside the apartment, Lucas said, "I shouldn't have sold the house without asking you. I'm sorry." Julian looked at him. "What did I tell you last time?" Lucas paused, then quietly replied, "I love you." "Say it again." "I love you." Lucas didn't hesitate this time. "I love you, Julian." The words were so direct, so full of force, that Julian blanked for a second. His defenses dropped without warning. He looked away, then back. The words flowed. "You've been under a lot of pressure lately. I've been worried. My head's been a mess," Lucas said. "I keep having nightmares." "I put sleeping pills in your tea," Julian admitted. "I saw," Lucas replied. "Probably needed them." "I didn't want to go to Ken," Julian said. "I just wanted you to rest." "Do you still believe in me?" Lucas asked. Julian didn't answer. Instead, he pulled out a USB drive. He plugged it into the projector. Soft music filled the room. Julian hit autoplay, sat beside Lucas, held his hand. This was supposed to be a surprise. "I made it the day you came back from M country, but you beat me to the confession, so I shelved it. Let's watch it now." The lights dimmed. The room turned quiet. The projector lit up their faces in soft hues. Julian's presentation was simple. Photos, dates, citations. From age 18 to now, every photo of the two of them together. Group shots, class events, grad photos, award ceremonies, posters from volunteer work. The earliest, 2 teenagers on a newspaper as B-City's top scorers. Then, military training at med school, standing together, arms missing. From the photo, because they were behind each other's backs, play, fighting. Then their first time in white coats. Then debates, lectures, matching, basketball jerseys, graduation, doctoral robes, standing beside the dean like newlyweds in red. Then came their lives at Jiwa Hospital, resident, attending, deputy chief, every photo on the OB/GYN staff board, and finally, 2 photos without sources, because Julian had taken them himself. One was a candid shot on the windowsill at home. The other, Lucas alone, in a black suit, speaking at a conference. The music softened. Julian intertwined their fingers. Then the first words appeared on screen. "Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Like a stone dropped into still water." The words rippled through Lucas's heart. He had always thought Julian only liked him, that it was gratitude, or habit, or timing. But this was love. Julian had secretly photographed him at his best, and called him Summer. He wasn't a man of flowery words, but this was overflowing with love. Lucas's eyes burned. The screen faded to black. Julian's voice filled the room. "Dr. Ken is an excellent surgeon, but I trust you more than anyone." The curtains stirred in the wind. Moonlight crept across the floor, and in the glow of the projector, Julian turned to his lover and whispered, "If you believe you can do it, then Smiley and I will always believe in you." Love is a strange thing. It turns passive into bold. and pride into humility. But in the end, good love always transforms, always uplifts, always says, "I believe in you." And Dr. Shen finally choked out the words, pressing their foreheads. "Together in the dark, I promise you, I can..." The OR, usually buzzing with gossip, was once again living up to its name. While guiding the laparoscope, Lucas Shaw said to Zhang Cheng, "I need to ask you something." Zhang Cheng's hands didn't falter, but he tensed. "What's with the serious tone?" Lucas glanced at him, then got straight to the point. "Did you know Li Yalei and Huo Qingchun like Julian Grant back in college?" Zhang Cheng stiffened. He blurted, "You found out?" Lucas gave him a long, meaningful look. Zhang Cheng realized he'd just exposed himself. Frantically backpedaling, he shook his head. "I don't know anything. I know nothing." "So it was Julian, wasn't it?" Lucas pressed. "Shit," Zhang Cheng muttered. "Who told you?" Lucas didn't answer. Did Xu and Fan also know? Their old dorm had 6 people. Zhang Cheng, Lucas, Xu, Fan, and the 2 love-struck rich boys. Zhang Cheng swallowed hard. "Yeah." Lucas sighed. "Hurt. You guys are amazing friends. Keeping it from me. All this time, it's a long story," Zhang Cheng said with a sheepish grin. "But for the record, I was always on your side. Sure, they were chasing Julian, but I never wavered. I always thought you were the better man." "Huh?" "I never wanted to hide it. But those 2 bought so much stuff, gifts for the class, treated the dorm to dinners. They knew I was closest to you, so they even bought me a brand new gaming console. I'm sorry, Lucas. I was weak. I caved to capitalism. Lucas, the corruption of money runs deep." Zhang Cheng added, "We just wanted to keep the peace. Same dorm, you. No? If you'd all fought over Julian, the room would have been chaos. Besides," he added weakly, "Julian turned them both down. You and he stayed rivals. It didn't change anything. Truth be told, he'd worried back then that the 2 trust fund kids would start a fight. Thankfully, Julian's rejections kept the peace." Who'd have guessed Lucas would find out now of all times? "So, who told you?" Zhang Cheng asked. "Couldn't have been one of us. Wait, was it at that last reunion? Someone let it slip? Doesn't make sense," he muttered. "All those cakes and snacks, surely. We bought some silence." Lucas didn't reply, just stared ahead, looking like he was calculating how much betrayal he could take. Then he asked, "When's Huo Qingchun coming back?" "Soon, right?" They'd kept in touch in the dorm group chat. Huo had mentioned returning, and Li had even sent him a handshake emoji in response. "Probably this weekend," Zhang Cheng said, then narrowed his eyes. "Why?" Lucas gave a sly, not at all reassuring smile. "I just want to take them out. To dinner." After work, Zhang Cheng immediately opened WeChat and created a 3-person group chat to deliver the news. "You guys are done. Lucas knows you used to like Julian. He said he wants to take you out to dinner. Better start preparing." "Li Yalei. Huo Qingchun? Li Yalei. Who's the snitch?" "Huo Qingchun, Cleaver.jpg. Meanwhile, the alleged target of their affection remained blissfully unaware. Julian, unlike the 2 who'd lost out, had far more important things to worry about, like his boyfriend's gift-giving skills. There was a silk-ribboned gift box sitting on the coffee table. Lucas, lounging on the couch with a smug grin, announced, "Your present finally arrived." Julian raised a brow. "What is it?" "Custom-made clothing," Lucas said proudly. "Ordered from a top tailor. Took forever. Go on, try it." Julian had assumed it was a tailored suit and was about to protest the extravagance until he opened the box and found a pair of gray fleece-lined long johns. He stared in disbelief, picked them up, unfolded them, examined every inch. Yep, definitely long johns. Then turned to Lucas, expression unreadable. I noticed back at the plum garden that you don't wear any. And I've been watching. Doesn't look like you even own a pair, Lucas said. Not wearing them is bad for your health. Most maternity leggings are too short. Regular men's ones have tight waistbands. Not good for you or Smiley, he added. This one's got extra stretch, custom fit for a pregnant belly. Perfect for winter. Julian's ears flushed at the mention of the plum garden. He quickly folded the pants and stuffed them back into the box. I'm not wearing that. Sure, he wasn't a teenager anymore, but Julian had always been particular about clothes. If not for the pregnancy, he wouldn't even wear a puffer jacket. What kind of young, hot-blooded man wore long johns? Then a thought struck him. He reached over and lifted the cuff of Lucas's jeans. Black thermal fabric peeked out from beneath. Julian, the boyfriend, wears long johns. Apparently had for years. Lucas saw the look and said, young people think they're invincible, but just wait. Old age, joint pain, arthritis. You'll regret it. He grumbled like an old man. Honestly, Julian, your whole lifestyle's a mess. You skip breakfast, don't sleep right, don't dress warm. Your body's gotta last you another 50, 60 years. Show it some respect. Julian sighed. I do dress properly. Lucas rolled his eyes. Don't underestimate long johns. They saved me. Once. Julian gave him a skeptical look. Back in M country, when those robbers took my suit, I would have frozen to death without them. Lucas proudly rolled up his pants to show off his heroic long johns, going on about their insulation, fit, and sheer survivability. Julian did feel bad about what happened in M country, but the image of Lucas trudging through snow in long johns at night was a bit much. His affection wavered dangerously. So, for the sake of their continued romance, Julian shoved Lucas toward the shower, tossed him his loungewear, and shouted from the doorway, "Take the long johns off before you come out." Lucas grumbled in the bathroom, wanting to defend his beloved thermals, but before he could argue, his phone started ringing. Insistently. Julian, he called, "Can you grab that for me?" Julian fished Lucas's phone out of his coat. Expecting a work call, he answered, only to be greeted by a gush of excited English. "Oh my God, you finally picked up. Darling Shen, I have amazing news." Julian froze at the darling Shen. He glanced at the screen. No contact name. Foreign number. The voice continued, ecstatic. "Guess where I am?" "You'll never guess. I'm on a plane to Z country." A pause, presumably to check the time. 10 minutes to take off. "You'll see me soon. Oh, I'm so happy for you." Julian. He hung up. Expression blank, he knocked on the bathroom door. The water stopped. "Who was it?" "Your foreign friend is flying here. Just thought I'd let you know." He emphasized friend with cool precision. "What foreign friend?" Lucas sounded completely lost. Julian didn't respond. He tossed the phone and Lucas's pillow onto the couch, then kicked the Long John lover out of the bedroom. Baffled, Lucas sprawled on the couch, opened his call log and stared at the unknown number. No contact. Just international. He called back. Disconnected. Scam call? He sulked the rest of the night, thinking Julian's pregnancy hormones were getting out of control. But the next evening, as Lucas entered the OBGYN department office the door burst open, and a cheerful brunette exclaimed, "Shen!" Lucas blinked. Albert. The entire office turned toward the name. Everyone knew it, after all. They'd just watched his controversial surgery. Albert, ever the gentleman, smiled at the curious crowd, then turned to Lucas and said, "I've decided to take a break. Z country is my first stop on a world tour." Lucas looked confused. Albert beamed. "Yes, you guessed it. Mr. Baker woke up and is out of the ICU. So I'm officially free. In about 30 minutes, he added, glancing at the clock. S countries. Press secretary and Mr. Baker will give a joint statement. As for me, my job is done. Time to rest and mend my poor shattered heart. When Julian returned to his office, the place was unusually lively. Everyone seemed to be discussing something with great excitement. He glanced at Lucas's empty desk and asked Sang, "What's going on?" That country patient pulled through. Sang handed over his phone. Turns out it was a blood clot. Almost didn't make it. But he's stable now. Should be discharged soon. The official statement was predictably self-congratulatory, emphasizing how sudden the emergency had been, how difficult the operation was, how hard their government and doctors worked. Barely a mention of Dr. Albert. But even if they didn't credit him, the doctors at Jihua certainly remembered. Dr. Albert even showed up here. Sang added, "He said he's traveling. Z country. Looks super close with Lucas. I overheard him inviting Lucas to dinner and saying he brought him a gift." Julian blinked. Suddenly, the mystery call clicked into place. He hadn't memorized Albert's voice, hadn't realized it was him. So the foreign friend from the night before had indeed been Albert. Julian sighed. Maybe he had overreacted. He rubbed his temples. Where are they now? Probably the break room, Sang said. Lucas didn't change, so I doubt. He left. In the break room, Albert sipped his coffee. No sugar? Don't you find this awful? Lucas handed him sugar packets, but didn't mention the man had chosen bitterness a few weeks ago to mourn his career. So, you're really going to perform the surgery yourself? Albert asked. They'd just discussed the operation at length. Yes, Lucas said. I've seen Ken's case, but I trust my own hands more. I can't hand off someone I love to a stranger. Albert studied him, then nodded. You're serious. I respect that. Still, if it gets too risky, don't be afraid to abort. Lucas nodded. Understood, Albert added. Mr. Baker and I agreed to delay his hysterectomy. We're using estrogen suppression drugs for now, monitoring things before considering removal. If your patient's case turns out similarly, I recommend this approach. Extract the fetus, stabilize, and only attempt removal later. Don't rush it. Got it, Lucas said. Albert dropped 2 sugar packets into his mug. Then, with a grin, I'll be in Z country for a week. Care to be my tour guide? I've got work, Lucas replied, pulling up his schedule. But I can get you a great guide. Shame, Albert sighed, then handed over a gift box. Just a little something. Thanks for visiting me when things were dark. I was going insane. Lucas didn't visit out of sympathy, and both knew it. He pushed the box back politely. No need. Take it. These cufflinks will look great on you. I'd love to see you wear them. Albert smiled, slow and meaningful. So, how about dinner tonight? I'm hoping for a magical evening. Lucas blinked, took a second too long, then realized what Albert meant. Back when they'd first chatted, they'd discussed marriage and family. Albert had said life was short and he was a free eagle, unbound by anyone. Lucas had thought he meant he was a soloist. Now he understood it was just rebranded playboy. And he'd set his sights on him. I'm not interested, Lucas said firmly, standing. Thanks for the data, but I don't return favors that way. Albert raised his hands. Whoa, misunderstanding. I'm not asking for anything. Just 2 adults with needs. Nothing emotional. Nothing long-term. We part ways tomorrow either way. Just then, the door opened. Julian walked in and heard that last line. Lucas, mid-rejection, turned in surprise and locked eyes with a frosty Julian. Albert looked over and smiled politely. Hello, Julian? He'd been reflecting on whether he'd overreacted. Now he had 0 doubt. Albert turned to Lucas. Who's this? Lucas opened his mouth to explain, but Julian beat him to it. Partner, not colleague, not friend, not co-parent. Partner, a word that, in most contexts, meant live-in romantic companion. More. serious than boyfriend. Borderline domestic. Lucas stared at Julian's cold, elegant profile, speechless. Julian had never used that word before. Albert clearly understood. His expression shifted. Quickly, he pocketed the cufflinks, mumbled a goodbye, and disappeared. Apparently, he hadn't done his homework well enough. Julian turned to leave. Lucas scrambled after him, babbling. I didn't know he meant that. I was rejecting him. Julian ignored him. Lucas trailed behind like a puppy, chirping. Say it again. That word. Say it. Again. Just once, please. Julian walked faster. Lucas tried one last move. In the stairwell, he gently took Julian's hand. Beneath the white coat, Julian stayed silent. He wasn't mad at Lucas. They were far past suspicion. He just couldn't quite explain the tightness in his chest when he heard Albert's words. Lucas reached out, pressed a hand to Julian's belly, and whispered to the baby Smiley, please talk to your dad. Cheer him up. Julian swatted his hand away with a glare. Lucas leaned in and kissed his cheek. Julian turned his head. Lucas kissed his neck. And right then, thud, they both turned, standing frozen in the doorway, mouth agape. Zhang Cheng. For a split second, all three men were completely blank. Lucas Shaw was the first to react. He opened his mouth, hesitated, and said, You. That barely snapped Zhang Cheng back to reality. He glanced down at the cup that had rolled out of his hands, swallowed hard, and stared blankly for a long moment before finally blurting, The office water. Cooler's broken. So I came to the stairwell to get hot water. Oh. Lucas stepped aside awkwardly, pointing toward the machine. Go. Ahead. Zhang Cheng, stiff as a board, nodded mechanically and shuffled forward. Like a robot. Only to freeze mid-step, whip around, and stammer. Actually, thinking about it, I'm not really thirsty anymore, thanks. He snatched up his fallen cup and bolted like his life depended on it. Lucas pinched the bridge of his nose and groaned. Out of all the times for the water cooler to break, Julian Grant gave him a withering look. Lucas hung his head in guilt. I was wrong. I love you, Julian. You think he saw anything? Lucas asked hopefully. That angle, could he have seen me kiss you? Julian said flatly. You think he'd react like that if he didn't see? Right. Lucas sighed. Then the part where I touched your belly and talked to Smiley. You think he heard that too? No way to know for sure. Julian frowned. Go find him. We should talk. Lucas nodded solemnly, turned back toward the office, opened the door, and called, Zhang Cheng. Come out a sec. Zhang Cheng clutched his cup like a lifeline and backed away. I'm not coming out. No matter what you say, I'm not coming. I didn't see anything. You can't kill me. I swear I'll take it to my grave. The rest of the office stared, baffled. Yu Sang snorted. Are the bros falling out? Wu Rui added. Let's not talk about death in front of patients. Not the best idea. Zhang Cheng froze, expression twisted in agony. If only he could spill everything he'd just seen and heard, just to see if they could keep laughing. I'm not gonna kill you, Lucas said gently. Just want to talk. Talk my ass. Zhang Cheng shouted. If you're capable of that, what aren't you capable of? What did he do? Yu Sang leaned in, gleefully curious. Come on, spill. Do what? Oh, nothing. Just possibly fall in love with his mortal enemy, and maybe, possibly, get pregnant. Zhang Cheng replayed the scene in his mind and felt his brain implode. Few days ago, he'd told Lucas he'd heard a crazy rumor that he and Julian were together. He'd even laughed about it. But the real clown was him. They say the more ridiculous the gossip, the more likely it's true. Lucas sighed, walked over, pried the cup from Zhang Cheng's hands, hoisted him like a sack of flour, and dragged him out the door. Help! Help! Zhang Cheng yelled. I'm too young to die. He was so shaken his legs barely worked. He stumbled and staggered, like he was walking on clouds. Wu Rui stayed quiet, Yu Sang, meanwhile, fanned the flames. You see? Julian's clearly the calm one. Lucas is way too aggressive, doesn't suit him. Zhang Cheng, near the door, muttered weakly, "You might want to ease up on trash-talking Lucas, especially in front of Julian, or you'll regret it." Yu Sang scoffed. Shh. Finally, they hauled Zhang Cheng out of the office. Outside, Julian stood, with arms crossed, clearly considering whether to intervene. The moment Zhang Cheng saw both of them, he trembled. Before he could be double-teamed, he jerked away from Lucas's grip and said, desperately, "Fine. I'll go. Where are we talking? I'll walk myself." In the private room at the restaurant, Zhang Cheng eyed the dishes suspiciously, glanced at Lucas, then Julian. "You're not gonna poison me, are you?" Julian sighed, took a bite himself and said, "Eat." "Damn." Zhang Cheng stared at Julian. "You're really talking? This is real?" He set his chopsticks down and demanded, "Before I die, I want answers. Lucas kissed you. Why didn't you dodge?" Julian didn't react in time. Zhang Cheng turned to Lucas. "So you forced him?" Lucas glanced at Julian. "I wouldn't say that." Zhang Cheng gasped. "You are dating?" Julian nodded calmly. What the hell?" Zhang Cheng shouted at Lucas. "I've supported you for years, always had your back, and now you're with your sworn enemy?" Lucas looked sheepish. "Well, maybe you should support him now?" "Screw you!" Zhang Cheng collapsed into his chair, stunned. After a long silence, he glanced down at his glass of water, picked it up to warm his frozen hands, then froze again, eyes drifting to Julian's midsection. "You can just ask," Julian said. Zhang Cheng hesitated. "Then I'll ask." He repeated what he'd overheard, his voice trembling. "Smiley, talk to Daddy." What did that mean? Lucas turned pale. Zhang Cheng had clearly heard everything. Lucas massaged his temples, mind racing for a cover story. "It's, Julian touched his hand lightly. "It's true." Clang. Both Zhang Cheng and Lucas dropped their glasses. Julian sighed at their dramatics. A single lie takes 1,000 more to sustain. Zhang Cheng had already seen and heard too much. He'd start watching them more closely. And if he kept guessing, they'd never keep it hidden. Julian wasn't super close with Zhang Cheng, but they'd known each other for over a decade. He trusted Zhang Cheng wouldn't go blabbing. And now, with similar cases already reported in medical literature, male pregnancy wasn't as taboo as it once was. After careful consideration, Julian had decided telling just Zhang Cheng wouldn't be the end of the world. Even so, Zhang Cheng clearly wasn't ready. Hot tea soaked his pants. Julian passed Lucas some napkins. Zhang Cheng, hands trembling, took a few too. "You two are really something. Went so far as to make a baby?" "Julian?" Zhang Cheng's brain started racing. "No wonder you asked about Huo and Li. No wonder you flew abroad for that Albert case. No wonder you said you were dating, and that Ken report didn't feel rushed at all. Wait, you said you started dating after that, but the report came before? Oh hell, did the baby come before the relationship? Have you been secretly in love for years?" Julian decided not to answer. "Holy shit," Zhang Cheng breathed. "This is unreal. I must be dreaming." He turned to Lucas. "Punch me." Lucas raised a hand. "No, wait, never mind. I can't. I really can't handle this." Zhang Cheng shook his head, face pale. "This is just too damn surreal." Lucas pulled out his phone and transferred him some money. "Buy yourself 2 gaming consoles. And keep quiet." Zhang Cheng's hands trembled. "This is not on the same level as those other guys, man. Can I tell them you're dating? Not the baby, just the dating part, please? Let me share the trauma. I can't carry this alone." Lucas and Julian. They both liked Julian, right? You know that, Lucas. Think of it as an even exchange. I promise I won't tell anyone else. Just them, please. I'll explode if I don't. 1 minute later, Zhang Cheng entered a brand new group chat with Li Yale and Huo Chengchun. The latest messages were about how to make it up to Lucas. Dinner, reservations, fine wine, everything to win back his favor. Zhang Cheng smirked and typed, "Guys, huge news. Li Huo, you know why Lucas invited you to dinner? Because he and Julian are together. Li Huo? I saw him kiss Julian. And Julian didn't dodge. What followed was 998 exclamation marks from Lithium, 999 question marks from Huo, and a relentless barrage of calls. Zhang Cheng ignored them all, blocked their numbers, and finally, relieved, picked up his chopsticks. "Let's eat, Julian." He turned to Lucas and said sincerely, "Your dorm has the most harmonious relationships I've ever seen." Lucas laughed awkwardly. "Yeah, it's something, finally." On a beautiful spring evening, Huo Chengchun, having failed to reach Zhang Cheng, rebooked his flight and returned early. He met up with Li, and together, they ambushed Lucas outside the outpatient wing. Huo wore a trendy moss green beret. Li, in full business attire, sported a matching turquoise tie. They cornered Lucas. Lucas raised an eyebrow. "Been a while. You two look coordinated. Spring collection? You free tonight?" Huo asked, smiling with menace. "Li wants to take you out. Get in the car," Li growled. Huo brought wine. Lucas glanced at them and smiled sweetly. "Can't. Gotta drive Julian home." "What? You serious?" Huo shouted. "You're actually dating?" "I don't believe it," Li said. "Call him now." Lucas shrugged, pulled out his phone, put it on speaker, and dialed. Julian's voice came through, cool and clear. "What is it?" "Speaker's on," Lucas said. "Huo and Li are forcing me to dinner. Want to come?" A pause. "Julian, you go. I'll take a cab." "You sure?" "I'm not a child," Julian said, then added, "Come home early." Lucas beamed. "Okay. Be safe." He hung up, tucked his phone away, and slung an arm over each stunned. "Bro," he said. "Yes." "Now, where are we eating?" Li and Huo locked eyes. Both looked like they'd just had a heart attack. This wasn't just a win, it was total annihilation. Huo Chengchun clutched his chest. Li Yale massaged his temples. In the end, it was President Li's assistant who had to come down from the car and help both men into the back seat. Lucas Shaw gave them a look, then slid calmly into the front passenger seat. The ride was silent. The assistant drove like he was treading on ice. One look at the two backseat passengers and he swore one looked like he was about to kill someone, while the other looked like he was heading to a funeral. Only, the man in the passenger seat wore a smug spring breeze kind of smile. Finally, the assistant dropped them off at the high-end restaurant Lucas had reserved. He fled the scene before his boss could say a word. In the beautifully decorated private room, a bottle of Huo Chengchun's finest red wine sat in the center. Zhang Cheng, who had arrived early, looked over at the trio walking in and grinned, clearly healed from his prior emotional trauma. "Traitor." Huo Chengchun struck first. Lucas took a sip of fragrant fish soup and replied with serene indifference, "Who's the real traitor here? Back in college, who swore we'd be brothers for life, then secretly tried to date my mortal enemy? Li Yale, usually the epitome of composure, lost it. You still consider Julian your mortal enemy?" "Exactly," Huo added with a sigh. "I've never seen a mortal enemy end up in the same bed." "What did Julian even see in you?" Li muttered. "Didn't he hate your guts? In college?" "Exactly," Lucas said smugly. "He hated me because he cared. That proves I was the one he cared about most." "You're ridiculous," Huo shouted. calling for the waiter to uncork the wine, and pouring Lucas a full glass. "You're not leaving till you finish these bottles. Julian's waiting for me at home," Lucas said. "Can't be too late." "Duel me," Huo demanded. "I won't fight you," Lucas said, sipping his wine. "If I get hurt, Julian will. Worry. God damn it," Lee groaned. "Can you not mention Julian every other sentence? Will you die if you stop bragging for 5 minutes?" "Lee," Huo said, hands on hips, "help me get him drunk." Lee downed his glass and slammed it against Lucas's. "Bottoms up." "You don't drink. You're not a man." Lucas chuckled and obediently knocked back the glass. Huo topped it off. Again. "You're not leaving sober." "Careful," Zhang Cheng chimed in. "If you do get him drunk, he'll just call Julian to come pick him up. You'll feel worse." "No way," Huo said confidently. "Julian hates alcohol. He's never once had a drink." "Exactly," Lee agreed, already tipsy. "I've known him for years, not once." Half a bottle later, Lucas was visibly tipsy. He raised a finger, wagged it at them, and murmured, "His first drink was with me." Shit. Zhang Cheng swore he heard both their hearts break a little. By the end of it, the two schemers who'd planned to get Lucas drunk ended up even worse off than him. Lucas leaned back, swirling his wine, still sober enough to poke fun. "I suggest you stop drinking. Two lovesick rivals drinking together? Dangerous." The table ended in chaos. The once dignified heirs of massive fortunes ended the night passed out, one clinging to Zhang Cheng, sobbing, the other clutching Lucas, howling the lyrics to Love Scar Alliance. Lucas, half drunk, peeled them off. "I'm not heartbroken. Don't lump me in." After some time, as the alcohol started to wear off, Lee called his assistant. "Xiao Liu, come get me." Huo, right on cue, hiccuped and messaged his driver, "Uncle Wang, come pick me up." Then both turned to Lucas. One last chance to salvage their pride. "I don't have a driver," Lucas said, shrugging. "Might have to hail a cab." Finally, a win. They high-fived, basking in fleeting triumph. Then Lucas's phone rang. He hadn't muted the call, and Julian's cool voice came through clearly, tinged with a tenderness neither of them had ever heard before. "You're still not home?" Lucas slurred. "They forced me to drink." "Are you drunk?" "Not really." A soft sigh on the other end. "Wait there. I'll come get you." Lucas pinched the bridge of his nose, grinning at his phone like a drunk schoolboy. "Okay." Lee and Hu. They suddenly realized what it meant to win the battle but lose the war. Zhang Cheng doubled over with laughter. "Didn't you two say Julian would never come pick him up? Welp, he's on his way." Lee and Huo shut up. When Julian arrived, he was immediately assaulted by the heavy smell of booze. The scene he walked into, Lee and Huo half wrestling, half weeping, blaming each other for letting Lucas steal their beloved. Zhang Cheng was filming it all, laughing and yelling encouragement like a referee at a street fight. And Lucas, still swirling his wine glass, lips curled in an infuriating smile. His eyes, slightly drunk, glistened with mischief. Julian knew this face well, but when Lucas turned and their eyes met, Julian's heart still skipped a beat. Suppressing the flutter, he pushed through the smell of alcohol and stepped in. Lucas stood, waved lazily and said, "I'm leaving. Bye, boys." The two rivals looked up and saw Julian. Lee blinked hard. Huo collapsed to the floor. Julian pinched his brow. "Good to see you too, Julian," Huo moaned, clutching his chest like a Victorian widow. "Was it because I went abroad? Did that give him the edge?" Lee pounded his chest. "If he ever hurts you, come to me. My family owns half the municipal water supply. I'll leave it all to you." Lucas slung an arm around Julian. "We don't need your water company." Julian rolled his eyes but didn't shake him off. Figuring there was no reasoning with the drunkards, Julian gave a polite nod to the others and dragged Lucas out. Thankfully, Lucas hadn't lost all sense. He got home on his own 2 feet, no help needed. Julian had hailed a cab. Even so, he worked up a sweat escorting his tipsy boyfriend home. After Lucas showered and lay in bed, Julian followed and took his own turn in the bathroom. By the time he came back, he assumed Lucas had fallen asleep. He crept into bed, careful not to wake him, only to find Lucas's eyes wide open. "Can't sleep?" Julian asked. Lucas smiled, eyes curved into crescents. "I don't know why. I just feel really happy tonight." Too tired to protest, Julian let him rest a hand lightly on his stomach. Through the fabric, Lucas's palm was warm and steady, and Julian, sensitive as ever, could feel every ridge of his lover's fingers. The sensation was soothing. His breath calmed. He started to drift, until he felt something press softly against his lips. Startled, he opened his eyes, only to see Lucas gazing at him, eyes hazy and mischievous. Before he could speak, Lucas placed a finger on his lips. "Shh, don't talk. Let me kiss you." That one finger, slightly cool, gently pressed against his warm mouth. Though clearly a little drunk, Lucas's gaze was unwavering, soft and direct. Julian flushed. The soft sound of fabric brushing against skin echoed in the silence. Lucas's gaze burned with a teasing heat, like gentle nuzzling. Julian swallowed hard, suddenly feeling breathless. He pressed a hand against Lucas's chest, trying to calm his own racing heart. But he forgot. Lucas's finger was still on his lips. Each breath kissed that finger, leaving it damp with heat. Julian's shirt had ridden up a bit, bearing a small strip of skin. Maybe planned, maybe not. But Lucas's hand slid right there. His fingers touched bare skin, and Julian let out a soft gasp. His mouth parted slightly. Lucas seized the moment. His lips crashed down, hungry and hot. Julian's lips were warm from the earlier touch, soft and sweet like molten chocolate. One arm curled around Julian's waist, the other braced beside his head. Lucas kissed him thoroughly, deeply. Julian's fingers clutched his shirt tight. This kiss was different, fierce, needy. There was fire in it, reckless and burning. It trailed from his lips to his eyes, down to his neck, marking every inch. With soft heat, Julian's pale skin turned pink under each kiss. He didn't want to fall, but couldn't resist. Lucas's palm burned hot against his waist. He could feel every line. Combined with the wine on Lucas's breath, it was like ice grapes soaked in fire, fermenting beneath the moonlight. Julian curled his toes, clutching Lucas's hand like a lifeline. Outside, clouds parted and rejoined. Inside, two warm, damp hands found each other beneath the covers. And when Julian tried to retreat, Lucas didn't stop. "Don't tense up," Lucas whispered, breath warm. "Show me how Dr. Grant usually does it." Julian, flushed, glared at him. "Don't you have any shame?" Lucas leaned close, laughing low. "Just trying to help you relax." Julian, already flushed and sweating, rasped. "Plato would cry." Lucas chuckled, voice low in Julian's ear. "I'll be Plato. You don't have to be." Julian's ears tingled from the sound. His heart followed. This drunk Lucas, brazen and shameless, was surprisingly effective. So Julian bit his shoulder. Permission granted. Lucas grinned, whispered, "Try not to be too loud. Smiley might wake." Then added, "If you really can't hold it in, bite my shoulder." Julian glared. "You're impossible." But the glare melted in the dark, swallowed by breathless kisses and laughter. Outside, the city lights shimmered like stars. Inside, the bed was soft, the sheets warm, and, unlike the back seat of a car, the bedroom was perfect for everything Lucas was best at. At some point, the pink bunny fell to the floor, head first, but its owner had long since forgotten about it. "Julian," Lucas whispered after, watching Julian lie breathless on the Pillow. He leaned down, kissed his cheek. You okay? Julian didn't answer, just buried his face in the pillow. I believe you now. Lucas chuckled. You really don't watch that kind of thing. He kissed his forehead. My shoulder's bleeding. You bit hard. Julian's gaze flickered, caught. Lucas leaned in, pouted. It hurts. Kiss it better? Julian's voice was hoarse and soft, like he didn't want to wake someone else. Pure breath, no sound. He sat up and reached for Lucas's collar, fingers shaking slightly from exhaustion. Lucas watched, head tilted, as Julian, eyes red, fingers trembling, quietly undid his buttons. And suddenly, Lucas remembered something. A memory long sealed by cheap wine flooded back. A black tie blindfold, a sharp jawline, a taunting voice. Running out of steam already? Lucas, voice hoarse. You, the other scoffed. With that stamina? You want to outdo me? You can't. Fury bubbled. Lucas grabbed him, lifted him. You dare say I'm weak again? Julian shrieked, clutching his shoulders. You put me down right now. Lucas didn't. He held tight, refused to drop him, even as Julian clung to him in panic. And when he realized something was off, he hissed, You undressed me. Not yourself? Julian, you undressed me. Back in the present, Lucas suddenly realized Julian's temper had mellowed so much since then. Julian noticed his look. What is it? He asked. Lucas cleared his throat, avoided his gaze. Too much, too fast, too hot. He couldn't unsee that Julian, flushed, red-eyed, feral and beautiful. Julian glanced down, then up. I'll go cool off, Lucas mumbled and bolted to the bathroom. He had barely turned on the shower when Julian opened the door. They locked eyes, bathroom lights reflected in the mirror. Steam clung to the glass. Lucas looked like a man drowned in moonlight. Julian stepped inside, wine still on his breath. Lucas suddenly felt he wasn't the only one drunk tonight. Outside, the city dozed beneath winter's hush. Inside, everything was warm. As Julian drifted off in Lucas's arms, exhausted, sated, peaceful, Lucas, wide awake, whispered in his ear, Julian Grant, how about we turn partner into husband?
If this chapter moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Nova Media. Thanks for listening.